A female lawyer is targeted by a mob boss and rushes back to her office to hide crucial evidence of his crimes, hoping it will save her life. To her surprise, her son, Sangpal, has also come to the office because he missed her, leaving her unsure of what to do. At that moment, the mob boss, Lao He, arrives downstairs. Realizing the danger, the lawyer, Jin Ai, writes an address on the back of a photo and tells her son that the man in the picture is his uncle. She instructs Sangpal to find him if anything happens to her. Lao He soon confronts Jin Ai. Refusing to hand over the evidence, Lao He notices a dripping wet umbrella and realizes someone else is in the room. He throws the umbrella in front of Jin Ai and begins calling for Sangpal. Brave as Sangpal is, his presence weakens his mother's resolve. Lao He resorts to cruel methods, forcing Jin Ai to hand over the evidence, a memory card. At that moment, another car arrives, bringing Lao He's boss, who orders him to kill both mother and son. Desperate, Sangpal swallows the memory card. Enraged, Lao He threatens to cut open Sangpal's stomach. Sangpal fights back furiously, but is stabbed by Lao He. With her last strength, she locks Sangpal in a secure room. Sangpal escapes through the window, jumping off the roof and narrowly avoiding capture. While hiding, he accidentally witnesses the true mastermind behind the crimes, but is soon discovered by Lao He. Sangpal flees and encounters Officer Lao Wan, hoping for salvation. However, it turns out that Lao Wan is an accomplice of Lao He. Sangpal is captured, but seizes an opportunity to bite Lao Wan, causing their vehicle to crash. Injured, Lao Wan loses control, and Sangpal escapes. With his mother's help, he finds his uncle, Brother Hyung Man, a former gangster, and informs him of his mother's murder. 18 years later, Sangpal has become a prominent lawyer in Seoul, driving a Ferrari and returning to his hometown to avenge his innocent mother. Despite his success, he remains steadfast in his pursuit of justice. When a fellow lawyer, Jae Yi, is suspended for 6 months for her principles, the law firm fires her to avoid further trouble. Helpless, she returns to her hometown. There, a group of thugs causes chaos at her house because of her father's debts. Afterward, Jae Yi confronts Sangpal, berating him for his arrogance. But Sangpal, also a lawyer, counters by mocking her suspension, leading to a heated argument. The next moment, Jae Yi finds herself in jail. To her surprise, Sangpal offers to hire her to repay her father's debt. With no other choice, Jae Yi agrees. Unbeknownst to her, this is all part of Sangpal's plan. Now a renowned lawyer, Sangpal has returned to his hometown to avenge his mother's death and bring the true culprit to justice. Meanwhile, a shocking case shakes the town. The former mayor is murdered, and the suspect arrested turns out to be Lao Wan, one of the accomplices in Sangpal's mother's murder. Sangpal visits the detention center and offers to defend Hyung Man in court, intending to use him to expose the real mastermind. Though Hyung Man doesn't recognize Sangpal after all these years, he immediately rejects the offer. Hyung Man is represented by lawyer Gao, a top attorney in the region with a perfect appeal success rate. However, when the prosecutor presents evidence requiring lawyer Gao to defend Hyung Man, things start to go awry. Hyung Man panics when his team, Fatty, denies knowing him, leading to a failed first trial. Sangpal confronts Lao Wan again, revealing that lawyer Gao is working under orders and never intended to help him. Still, Hyung Man refuses to cooperate until Sangpal shows him a video exposing lawyer Gao's true employer, Lao He, Hyung Man's former accomplice and Sangpal's mother's murderer, now a powerful businessman. That night, Sangpal receives a call from Hyung Man, who finally agrees to let him take over his defense. This marks the first step in Sangpal's long-awaited revenge. Later, Jae Yi faces her own troubles. While heading to court, she is abducted by a gang of thugs led by Ma Biao, who drag her to a luxurious club. Meanwhile, Sangpal is preparing for a trial and notices Jae Yi's absence. He receives a call from Ma Biao, who hesitates, suspecting he may have kidnapped the wrong person. Moments later, Sangpal confidently walks into the club. Unfazed by the gang, he creates a scene and quickly reaches Jae Yi. Ma Biao attempts a sneak attack, but Sangpal counters with a powerful punch, knocking him out. At the same time, chaos erupts in the courtroom as a crowd disrupts proceedings. Even the judge is stunned and unable to control the situation. As the court descends into disorder, Sangpal and Jae-yi return, prepared to begin the trial. Sangpal shocks everyone by immediately requesting a change of judge. This daring act lands him in prison, but it's all part of his plan to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Sangpal's partner, Jae-yi, works to convince the key witness, Xiaopang, to testify. Initially resistant due to a personal grudge, Xiaopang relents when Jae-yi appeals to his humanity by using Hyungman's wife's battle with cancer. Xiaopang not only agrees to testify, but also provides surveillance footage from the day of the crime. With new evidence in hand, Hyungman is released, but Moon-suk dismisses it as invalid in court, realizing that proving Hyungman's innocence is futile under Moon-suk's influence. The team shifts its focus to exposing the real killer. Sangpal sends an informant to work as a cleaner at Lao Hei's company, and secretly plants a tracker on Lao Hei's assistant. Following the assistant, they discover his dealings with a middleman hired to smuggle a man. Using this lead, Sangpal tracks down the middleman and confronts him, even dangling him over a rooftop. Terrified, the middleman admits his involvement and identifies the man he smuggled, a key figure in the murder plot. At that moment, the man in question arrives at the middleman's door, and Sangpal gives chase, following him into the subway. Jae-yi, worried for Sangpal's safety, joins the pursuit through the subway tunnels. After a tense and chaotic confrontation, Sangpal manages to overpower the man. However, their fight pushes both to the edge, leaving Sangpal with no choice but to let the man escape temporarily. The assassin holds Jae-yi hostage, wielding a knife. Fueled by rage, Sangpal furiously warns the killer, "If she gets even a scratch, I'll make your life a living hell." Amid the flickering lights, Sangpal's raw determination peaks. He catches the assassin's blade with his bare hands, stunning the attacker. Overwhelmed, the assassin succumbs to Sangpal's relentless blows, confessing that Lao Hei ordered the mayor's assassination. Before they can rejoice, the assassin breaks free and hurls himself into the path of an oncoming subway train, ending his life. The traumatized Jae-yi collapses into Sangpal's arms, prompting him to take her to the hospital. Facing police interrogation, Jae-yi snaps back with defiance. "We're lawyers, not criminals." They leave the station, determined to find another way to free Hyungman. At their law firm, Sangpal discovers the assassin's phone have evidence. He asks his tech teammate, and he demands it be unlocked within a day. Surprisingly, the phone's secrets are cracked at a funeral parlor. The unlocked device reveals a crucial lead. The middleman not only hid the assassin, but also connected him to Lao Hei, implicating him directly in the mayor's murder. Sangpal wastes no time and calls the last number dialed on the phone. To his shock, the call connects to Lao Hei's assistant. Realizing the threat, Lao Hei strikes his assistant in a fit of panic, fearing exposure. With the new middleman, Sangpal and Jae-yi rush to track him down. Their investigation leads them to an unexpected scene, the middleman communicating in sign language with an elderly woman. Sangpal quickly deduces that the woman is the middleman's mother. To spare her from witnessing her son's arrest, Sangpal holds his team back. Shortly after, the middleman attempts to flee by car. One of Sangpal's men shatters the vehicle's window, cornering him before he can escape. As the middleman makes a daring escape, flooring the accelerator, the middleman evades Sangpal's team and even rams into Sangpal's car. He speeds into a narrow alley, narrowly avoiding a collision with an oncoming van. Despite the chaos, Sangpal stays hot on his trail, refusing to back down. In a dramatic turn, Sangpal finally captures the middleman and drags him to a public event, a ceremony honoring Judge Moon-suk's father. In front of a shocked audience, Sangpal shoves the middleman toward the prosecutor, declaring, "This man is an accomplice to the mayor's murder." His bold move not only exposes the middleman, but also implicates Judge Moon-suk. Judge Moon-suk, humiliated and enraged, slaps Lao Hei, scolding him for ruining the event. Lao Hei, however, bites his tongue, knowing he must endure this public humiliation. But he has a trump card. He reveals Sangpal's true identity to Judge Moon-suk, that he is the son of Attorney Choi, who was murdered 20 years ago by Lao Hei. 20 years ago, a corruption case left two children, Sangpal and Jae-yi, motherless. Now, both have grown into top-tier lawyers, united not only by their shared grief, but also by their determination to bring justice. Unfortunately, on the day of the trial, the middleman appears brainwashed and refuses to cooperate. Every time Sang-pal questions him, Judge Moon-suk intervenes, blocking his efforts. But Sang-pal anticipated this and had a backup plan. His team brings the middleman's elderly mother into the courtroom. Despite being a criminal, the middleman is a devoted son. Knowing this, Sang-pal puts the pressure on, warning, "You're in the witness stand now, but if you don't tell the truth, your next stop will be the defendant's chair." Confronted with evidence of his past illegal activities, including dealing in drugs, the middleman crumbles under the weight of his conscience and the desire to protect his image in his mother's eyes. He finally reveals the truth. Lao Hei orchestrated the assassination of the mayor by hiring the killer. This revelation turns the trial in Sang-pal and Jae-yi's favor, but their triumph is short-lived. Lao Hei, accompanied by his lawyer, visits Hyungman. He shows him a damning video signaling that he has more tricks up. Worse, Lao Hei threatens Hyungman with his wife's life, forcing him into replacing the lawyer defending him. Sang-pal reveals to Jae-yi a heartbreaking truth. Her mother, a photographer, accidentally captured incriminating photos of Lao Hei committing his crimes in the past to cover his tracks. Lao Hei ordered Hyungman to eliminate both Jae-yi's mother and Sang-pal's mother. However, during the attack, Sang-pal managed to escape after biting Hyungman's hand, causing a car crash. Jae-yi's mother heroically sacrificed herself to save Sang-pal. The revelations leave Jae-yi in turmoil. She confronts Hyungman, who is consumed by guilt. In a dramatic twist, Hyungman arranges a meeting with Lao Hei and, in front of him, calls Sang-pal. Lao Hei, confident of his control, doesn't expect Hyungman's betrayal. Sang-pal and Jae-yi find themselves in a tense courtroom battle. They discover that the prosecutor who accused Hyungman was blackmailed by Lao Hei due to massive gambling debts. Jae-yi tracks down a delivery truck that holds the original evidence, while Hyungman delays the trial. The evidence is presented in court, clearing Hyungman of all charges. As Hyungman is released, tragedy strikes. His wife, who endured years of suffering, passes away shortly after seeing her husband free. Racked with grief and finally free of Lao Hei's control, Fang retrieves hidden evidence of Lao Hei's crimes and delivers it to Sang-pal and Jae-yi. Before leaving, he tells Jae-yi, "I don't owe you anything anymore," recalling the fateful night when he spared her mother's life and helped her escape. Hyungman confronts Lao Hei with a gun, but his attempt at revenge fails as Lao Hei overpowers him. Meanwhile, Sang-pal and Jae-yi pore over the evidence, only to realize that many of the crimes have exceeded the 15-year statute of limitations under South Korean law. Meanwhile, Sang-pal's uncle, Seong-da, learns from officer that Jae-yi's mother, Da-mei. Seong-da locates her, and together they vow to help Sang-pal and Jae-yi achieve justice. At the same time, Da-mei sneaks Judge Moon-suk's home disguised as a masseuse. Lao Hei, aware of Sang-pal's efforts, lures Seong-da into a trap. Despite Seong-da's fierce defiance, Lao Hei's men incapacitate him with a syringe, leaving him weak. Lao Hei coldly remarks on the syringe's effectiveness as Seong-da collapses. Before succumbing, Seong-da calls Sang-pal and warns him to stay away. However, Sang-pal, desperate to save his uncle, speeds to the scene in his car. When Sang-pal arrives, he discovers his uncle hanging by a rope, barely alive. As he rushes to save him, Sang-pal, consumed by rage and grief, fights off the attackers, unaware that he is being framed for murder. A bloodied knife is planted on him. One of Lao Hei's henchmen cuts the rope, sending Seong-da dropping. In a moment of desperation, Sang-pal pulls with all his might to save his uncle, but despite his efforts, Seong-da, weakened from a fatal stab wound, bids him farewell with a final plea to focus on his career as a lawyer rather than seeking revenge. Heartbroken and powerless, Sang-pal's world shatters as the police arrive and arrest him for the murder of his uncle. The news reports that Sang-pal, driven by greed, allegedly killed Seong-da in an attempt to seize his wealth. Soon after, Jae-yi and her friends saw a news report stating that Sang-pal had plotted to take his uncle's fortune. The police then stormed Sang-pal's law office and, right in front of Jae-yi, discovered drugs used to cause unconsciousness. At this moment, the crime boss was smugly enjoying his success. Incriminating evidence was also found in Sang-pal's law office. Sangpal had no choice but to plead with Jae-yi, his lawyer, to handle his uncle's funeral arrangements. But Jae-yi firmly told him no. Sangpal then begged Judge Moon-suk for help. Surprisingly, Judge Moon-suk agreed to release Sangpal temporarily to attend his uncle's funeral. At the funeral, Sangpal faced constant hostility, but Detective Kong intervened. Standing before his uncle's shrine, Sangpal broke down in tears. That night in prison, Sangpal reflected on the phone call where the crime boss said, "The person you care about the most isn't Jae-yi, it's your uncle." Failing to save his uncle filled Sangpal with immense pain. The next day, Lao Hei came to taunt him. As Sangpal banged his head against the glass, he shouted, "Why not me?" The boss sneered and replied, "Have you ever seen a guest eat duckweed salad first?" As Lao Hei prepared to leave, Sangpal remarked, "It seems you and Judge Moon-suk are not on the same page. Judge Moon-suk wants to save me, but you want to kill me." The boss's face twitched uncontrollably. Furious, he went to confront Judge Moon-suk, only to have a glass of wine thrown in his face. It became clear that even if he became mayor, he would always be just a servant in Judge Moon-suk's eyes. In her efforts to defend Sangpal, Jae-yi visited the crime scene. However, the location was an old building slated for demolition, with no surveillance cameras nearby. While there was an eyewitness, the case remained incredibly challenging. Even Jae-yi's father tried to persuade her to give up, but she told him firmly, "I will save Sangpal, because he is the one I love." The trial soon began. Seeing Jae-yi's trembling hands, Sangpal held her hand to give her strength. The prosecution presented evidence: drugs that caused unconsciousness, a knife with Sangpal's fingerprints, and even a witness who claimed to have seen Sangpal push the victim off the building. All the evidence pointed to Sangpal as the murderer. Jae-yi, however, produced a photograph she had taken at the scene, a billboard. She covered the color of the billboard and asked the eyewitness to identify it. The witness angrily claimed it was red. Jae-yi then revealed the billboard, which was clearly white. This turned the case in Sangpal's favor, but the prosecution was not easily shaken. Prosecutor presented an insurance policy naming Sangpal as the beneficiary of Daxiong's death. He pressed Sangpal relentlessly, accusing him of orchestrating the murder because he stood to benefit the most. In the first trial, Sangpal was completely defeated. However, a twist emerged. The nephew's scheme to harm Sangpal ultimately backfired. Sangpal harmed himself when he brought out a cheap weapon, intending to scare him. Unexpectedly, the scare was overdone, and he panicked. In fact, everything was part of Sangpal's plan. He fled in fear, and Sangpal was eventually released on medical parole. Jae-yi received a call and rushed to the hospital, where she found a gravely ill Sangpal. Overwhelmed, she collapsed. After a grueling 5-hour surgery, Sangpal was brought back from the brink of death. Jae-yi gazed at the unconscious Sangpal. Sangpal suddenly spoke, revealing he had been pretending to sleep. Jae-yi, flustered, punched him in embarrassment. The next day, Lao Hei came to visit Sangpal, a classic display of crocodile tears. Sangpal grabbed his collar, ready to tear him apart, but the boss smirked mockingly him. After Lao Hei left, Sangpal revealed a sly smile. His scheme to sow discord had begun to take effect. He first informed Lao Hei that Judge Moon-suk wanted to save him, while the boss wanted him dead. The crime boss confronted Judge Moon-suk, only to have a glass of wine thrown at him. Judge Moon-suk coldly reminded him that he was merely a dog under her control. "If something happens to Sangpal, you won't survive either," Judge Moon-suk warned. After Judge Moon-suk left, Lao Hei was furious and humiliated. He realized Sangpal's actions, stabbing himself, had led Judge Moon-suk to suspect that the crime boss had disobeyed orders and tried to kill Sangpal. Lao Hei visited the hospital to confirm if Sangpal knew who had stabbed him, but it was clear that Sangpal had no idea. Back home, Lao Hei grew increasingly anxious, wondering who was trying to frame him. If Sangpal died, Judge Moon-suk would undoubtedly kill him. The more he thought about it, the more suspicious he became. He decided to return to the hospital. As soon as he arrived, he and Sangpal were surrounded. At that moment, the two became unlikely allies. Lao He, showing his ruthless nature, grabbed a stick and started fighting back, while Sang Pal, despite his serious injuries, held his own. Together, they managed to break through the siege. Sang Pal escaped back to his law office, while Lao He returned home and suddenly realized Judge Moon-suk's true intentions. He thought, "Judge Moon-suk, you're truly cunning. First, she tricked him out of all my money. Then you eliminated all his relatives, leaving him as an empty shell of a mayor. Now she even wants to silence him to cover up her tracks. Even as a mayor, I have to kneel before this woman every day. She cheated me out of all my money and even wants to kill me. Today, I finally exploded in court while defending the accused murderer, Sang Pal. It turned out the mayor's guards had killed Sang Pal's uncle and framed Sang Pal for it. In a dramatic turn, Lao He knelt in court to beg for the public's forgiveness. Judge Moon-suk had no choice but to declare Sang Pal not guilty. Lao He eventually regained his fame and fortune, even receiving a visit from Judge Moon-suk. At this meeting, Lao He produced a photograph from 20 years ago, which showed himself and Judge Moon-suk. Judge Moon-suk, sensing danger, realized their relationship had completely broken down. Meanwhile, Sang Pal began a new wave of attacks. He had Judge Moon-suk's every move monitored and learned through a listening device that Judge Moon-suk wasn't content with her current position. She was even planning to become the Chief Justice of Seoul. Sang Pal couldn't allow that to happen. He and Jae Yi sought out reporters and exposed the photo of Judge Moon-suk committing murder. When Judge Moon-suk saw the news, her face turned pale. Her application for the Chief Justice position was rejected by the election committee. Judge Moon-suk quickly launched a counterattack by holding a press conference, only to be assaulted by a man. The man was the father of a child whom Judge Moon-suk had sentenced to death. In a bid for revenge, he struck her with a bottle. However, Sang Pal immediately saw through the ruse. It was all part of Judge Moon-suk's plan to distract from the murder photo scandal. In a show of public humility, Judge Moon-suk forgave her attacker in prison, gaining sympathy and effectively. Elsewhere, Judge Moon-suk's masseuse, Da-mei, approached Sang Pal and revealed that she was Jae-yi's mother. Sang Pal was stunned, as Da-mei had supposedly been killed 20 years ago while trying to save him. Sang Pal, in disbelief, asked Da-mei if she had sent him the notebook containing Judge Moon-suk's criminal records, but Da-mei insisted she had never sent it. Sang Pal finally understood that everything was a setup by Judge Moon-suk in her bid to become Chief Justice. First, she helped Sang Pal pass the bar exam, then sent him her notebook documenting her past murders. This was all to lure Sang Pal back to seek revenge on Lao He, thereby covering up her crimes from 20 years ago. What Da-mei didn't realize was that Judge Moon-suk had already noticed her unusual behavior. She immediately instructed her butler to eliminate Da-mei. The butler hired a hitman to kill Da-mei, but the hitman recorded a video. This video was later submitted to the court. Lao He, humiliated and betrayed, brought 5 men to take Da-mei, sealed her in an oil drum. Just as they were about to leave, the crime boss arrived. However, outnumbered, Lao He was about to face a beating when he pulled out a gun. Meanwhile, 3 men pushed the oil drum out. Lao He chased after them, but was a step too late, watching helplessly as the drum sank into the sea. Shito was furious, while the crime boss remained silent. An hour earlier, Judge Moon-suk had instructed the butler to kill Da-mei because she was the only witness to the murder Judge Moon-suk and the crime boss committed 20 years ago. The hitman, however, recorded the butler giving the order, and when Judge Moon-suk saw the video, she smiled slyly. The next day, the butler was arrested by prosecutors. The butler, furious, shouted at the police and claimed the video was fabricated. She called Judge Moon-suk for help, but Judge Moon-suk coldly told her to confess. Realizing she'd been set up, the butler remembered Judge Moon-suk's recent instructions to clean out all the accounts of the foundation. The butler had also been involved in covering up Judge Moon-suk's crimes 20 years ago. To avoid public suspicion, Judge Moon-suk arranged for one of her allies to be the judge overseeing her case. Lawyer Sangpal visited the butler in prison, pretending to want to defend her, but in reality, he sought evidence of Judge Moon-suk's crimes. The butler, initially cautious, refused, but Judge Moon-suk later threatened her by using her daughter's future as leverage, forcing her to plead guilty. Furious and feeling betrayed, the butler called Sangpal and agreed to let him represent her. On the trial day, Sangpal requested to replace Judge He with Judge Che, exposing Judge He as a pervert. Judge Moon-suk, aiming for National Chief Justice, began exposing all the crime boss's misdeeds as mayor to clean her own slate. Lao He retaliated by kidnapping Sangpal's girlfriend and threatened Sangpal, demanding he kneel before him. When Lao He was about to shoot, Jia Yi intervened. She took advantage of Shuto's distraction, first delivering a devastating kick, then using a makeshift weapon to incapacitate him. She delivered one final blow to his kidney before pulling out the notebook from Sangpal's bag and throwing it to the ground. The crime boss hurriedly picked it up. Jia Yi, seizing the moment, opened the notebook and revealed its contents, causing Lao He to freeze in fear. She immediately explained that everything was part of Judge Moon-suk's scheme. Lao He, true to his nature, disassembled his gun, leaving only one bullet. Was he preparing for a deadly game of Russian roulette with Sangpal? No, he handed the gun to Jia Yi, declaring that he and Sangpal would settle things once and for all. The loser would have to take the bullet. At the start of the fight, the crime boss, relying on his experience, gained the upper hand. However, as the battle wore on, his strength began to fade. Sangpal seized the opportunity, locking the crime boss in a chokehold. He had the chance to kill him and avenge his mother, who had died at the crime boss's hands 20 years ago. But Jia Yi stopped him just in time. As they looked at the notebook left behind by Sangpal and Jia Yi, the crime boss made an unexpected decision. The following night, Lao He arrived at Judge Moon-suk's house with his small revolver, intending to kill her. However, Judge Moon-suk gave him two choices: die there or leave forever. Lao He ordered 2 plane tickets, but the next day, the ticket delivery man attempted to stab him. Fortunately, his subordinate protected him, and they waited for Sangpal's arrival. When the delivery man saw he couldn't win, he fled. Lao He narrowly escaped death. Lao He, sitting in a corner, reflected on how he had helped Judge Moon-suk rise to power, only to be repeatedly targeted for elimination. Finally, he could no longer bear it and agreed to Sangpal's request to testify against Judge Moon-suk for her murderous deeds. Meanwhile, Judge Moon-suk's butler was also framed by her and sent to prison. On the day of the trial, Judge Moon-suk was confident she would win, but was shocked when Lao He unexpectedly took the stand to testify. Judge Moon-suk had anticipated this and thought she could easily dismiss the few photos and Lao He's words as insufficient evidence to prove her involvement in any murders. Just then, a woman slowly entered the courtroom. This was Sangpal's trump card. Judge Moon-suk was stunned. She had thought that Jia Yi's mother, Da Mei, had been eliminated, so how could she possibly be here? It turned out that when the butler was preparing to kill Da Mei, Sangpal received a tip-off and had switched Da Mei with another woman to save her. With the crucial witness and evidence now in place, the truth about a case from 20 years ago was finally revealed. Judge Moon-suk had killed Lao He's father after an insult, and later, the crime boss helped him dispose of the body. However, Da Mei had taken pictures of everything and gave them to Sangpal's mother before being murdered by Lao He. The revelation caused the public to rise in anger, and they began to curse Judge Moon-suk. Both Judge Moon-suk and Lao He were sentenced to legal punishment, but while being transported, Lao He managed to escape. When Sangpal arrived at the scene, he found the crime boss in a pitiful state. Lao He, desperate to avoid legal consequences, provoked Sangpal, but despite his rage, Sangpal eventually regained control. He grabbed the gun from Lao He, almost succumbing to revenge, but ultimately chose not to kill him. Meanwhile, Judge Moon-suk, refusing to be arrested by the police, walked proudly to the police car. Finally, Judge Moonsuk pays for her sin and spent her whole life in jail. While Sangpal won the affection of Jae Wee, bringing the series to a conclusion. Thanks for watching.